David. Thank you, Leah.
Good morning. I think some people are still going to trickle in, but we'll get started. Today we have Beth Kiser. She's an accomplished cellist and music teacher. She taught many years in the Madison Public Schools and teaches private cello lessons, which is how our paths crossed. She taught music to both of my daughters. She is also a musical therapist and will talk to us about the impact of music and sound on our well-being. And for the people at home, we're working hard to get the music to broadcast at home, but we are having some difficulties with that, and we apologize. Oh, she's here with her daughter, Leah.
I am so happy to be here. And Wendy's daughters, Carolyn and Melissa, were just gems in my life. I treasured working with them and being their teacher. And so when Wendy called me, I was like, sure, whatever you want. I'd be glad to come and work with you. And I know how important your church is in your life and how the girls have been so involved in mission work and everything. So it's such a privilege, really, truly a privilege and an honor to be invited. And also, I was thrilled to have Leah help me haul in all this gear. My little girls, my baby girl, all 34 and married a couple weeks ago, is back and helping me out. So I'm really grateful to Leah for carrying stuff in. So I gave you all a handout, and I really don't have an agenda today. Um, I guess I do. That's a lie. I do have an agenda. My agenda is to really share my passion for the impact of music and wellness and well-being, and to take it from a historical perspective, from Soham, from the essence of our tribal indigenous communities and our roots and all of the cultural traditions and religions around the world, from Soham, which is the breath, the life force, right? Soham. Soham, in the beginning, there was the word, right? And that's in almost every culture. And I think you all are aware of that, because I know that I'm speaking to an audience of people who have a real vast knowledge base. So going from Soham to some of the most contemporary recent research in evidence-based music psychology and music and medicine. So that's the sort of the so how do we go from like 5,000 BC Tibetan culture all the way up to, what's going to be happening in 2036, when we really have a better understanding of the genome work and the work that Dr. Collins has done at the NIH with sound and music, and the recent discoveries of how 40 hertz impacts folks with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, right? So there's all kinds of like such exciting new research. So before I begin talking a lot, I'd just like to know, what are your questions? Like, why did you come down here today? Because I'll begin with maybe telling anecdotal stories that really relate to the questions that you have about my experience as a music therapist. And then I'll bring it up to the present. And at the very end, I don't do sound baths by myself. I perform with two other musicians who are absolutely phenomenal. I perform with Addie Farber with Wellspring Sound Arts. She's a nationally acclaimed, internationally acclaimed handpan player, virtuoso, who goes around the world doing workshops, just brilliant. And then Ash Guinari, whose voice emanates pure love and Reiki. So when I play with the two of them, we create the sound bath. So today I'm going to talk about some of the theories, some of my anecdotal experiences as a music therapist in my own personal life with music. And then we'll wrap it around with a sort of a mini sound exploration. Does that sound good to y'all? All right, so what are your questions? What brought you down here today?
I just wanted to mention that I have participated in a Native American drum circle ritual before, which is just phenomenal. The way that everyone's heartbeat got in sync. It it was really quite the experience. And so I'm really looking forward to
Well, I want to talk, so this is why I want to pick up on your questions. So Joshua Leeds, whose name is on here, is one of the people who began his work in psychoacoustics based on the work of Alfred Tomatis. And his work talks about how we build social cohesion. In the late 70s, early 80s, I went to India and I looked at how does the tal manifest and how does rhythmic entrainment manifest in our lives. through and how do we develop social cohesion. And then Christine Stevens with her upbeat drum groups has gone all around the world developing peace projects related to social cohesion through rhythm. And also on this sheet that I gave you is Yvonne Rawl, who's done projects in Palestine and in Israel and Saudi Arabia and India and works out in California. And he's done tons of work on how do we use rhythm and different elements of the tall, and now most recently 40 hertz to create peace. And yeah, that's exactly. And that's what I did my graduate work on when I was in graduate school on the use of music in the Families and Schools Together program, which was a national model program on developing cohesion between at-risk families or kids at that time. This is feeding back. Is it doing that for you guys too?
Well, it's a little, I don't can.
It's, I don't know how, does that work for you all? Does that work? How can I keep it from feeding back? Okay, is that working okay? Okay. So that project was about developing methods to bring kids who are struggling together. And a big component of the curriculum was the use of music and of Families and Schools Together and song. Families and Schools Together saying, yes, we can, FAST, Families and Schools Together, reaching for the sky. So this idea of social cohesion and also the use of rhythm to downregulate the parasympathetic system is something we found out in terms of its relationship to vagal nerve research. So yeah, I mean, I can just like respond to your questions and go off on all my favorite tangents. Yes.
I work with blacksmithing and turning firearms into garden tools, and I have a whole bunch of extra pieces. I'm wondering if there's a way of making music with gun pieces. And maybe we could work on that together.
What a lovely idea. So I wish there wasn't a band named Soundgarden already, because I'd really like to have a Soundgarden. And yeah, I mean, the gong is forged out of iron, right? Or out of iron ore. The Tibetan bowls are forged out of oil or out of iron. Um, and traditional Chinese medicine and metal is one of the fire elements, right? And that's one of the 5 elements that's associated with our well-being. So if we look at it from Taoist perspectives or from traditional Chinese medicine perspectives or from art perspectives or from physics perspectives, you betcha. So how about go look up John Stuart Reid, he's on our paper. And he talks about psychoacoustics and he talks about how the different instruments and the different elements of the instruments manifest different physiological responses in the body as measured through somatics and the level of protein in blood. So he's a fascinating man. He's a physicist. Anybody else have a question or what brought you here today?
Well, I don't know if it brought me here, but I'm always with this topic. To what extent do you have information or have you been involved and know the effects and good effects, positive, of working with people who have the brain disorders of serious mental illness?
Well, I did my clinical training at Milwaukee County. So I'm a board certified music therapist. I graduated in the 1980s as a 4-year program, very much like occupational therapy with an emphasis in music, and then a year-long of clinical training, which I did at Milwaukee County Mental Health Center. And then in the 1990s, I worked out at Badger Prairie in their mental health center here in Dane County for 3 or 4 years as a music therapist and then as an artist in education, and also worked in the tri-unit at Mendota, working with kids with severe disorders, and ran a program, a creative arts therapy program at Shabazz for kids who are on their last chance before expulsion or incarceration. So my experience with it is broad, and
But what have you seen? What effects, what positive effects have you seen? And what would you suggest are more positive than others?
I think one of the most important impacts is the development of, in a mental health setting, is the development of social cohesion and how people, regardless of their ability to be in reality-based interactions, can, through the process of how music is organized in the brain, participate in ensembles and in groups, and have a sense of belonging and have a sense of contribution. We know that music is very effective in the reduction of anxiety disorders. We know that when you use the perfect fifth interval, the do, do, so, so, which is twinkle, twinkle, and you sustain that rhythm for, or that intervallic work for 2 to 7 minutes, that you have a downregulation of the parasympathetic system and increase in the production of nitrous oxide, which helps to stabilize the body. And we see an increase in the production of happy hormones like oxytocin and serotonin. So it helps with mediating anxiety. The work of Lee Bartel at the University of Toronto was replicated at MIT recently, and then again at Harvard, and the NIH just gave $34 million to Stanford University to look at how we can use music specifically for people with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, which is, not necessarily a mental health disorder, but it's degenerative issue, right?
Disorder.
Yeah,
of the brain.
right, but not in like the sense of schizophrenia or character disorders. It's more about degenerative types of disease, right? So we've seen in Lee Bartel's work, which is absolutely fascinating, that when people are exposed to 40 hertz on a sound table of sound, along with the 40 hertz of light for 30 minutes, 3 times a week, that you have a decrease in symptoms related to loss of memory, loss of function, anxiety. So that's really current research, and that's what they're looking at right now at Stanford and at the NIH. So that's really exciting. In my own experience, just as a clinician, some of the most beautiful memories of my life are working with people with severe disabilities, and how it's heart opening and there's a sense of coming together on equal ground. And when I think about my mother-in-law, my sister's mother-in-law, actually, Jerry, who was a nursing supervisor in Wisconsin, she saw people with dementia for years in her work and would go and visit nursing homes. And she knew probably 15 years before Alzheimer's really began to manifest that she had soft signs. And we would go to concerts together. And as her disease progressed, it was harder for her to attend concerts. So we'd sit with each other and play duets. And then as the disease progressed, she could no longer play duets, but I would play with her and she would fill in the cadences at the end of the phrases. And then as the disease went further and she became bedridden, I would go into her room and I would play guitar with her. Or I would put the cello up alongside of her and I'd do her favorite hymns. And she'd request which hymns she'd want and she'd hum along. And as she began to lose speech, I would do all praise to thee, my God, this, the Tellus Canon, and she'd go, night, for all the blessings of the light, keep me, oh, keep me, she'd say. So she'd fill in the phrase. And at the very end of her life, I remember being at her bedside, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And the very last song she could do 2 days before she died was Jesus loves, and she said, me. And that was so powerful. Or my dear friend Vince Fish, I don't know if any of you knew him. He was a social worker and mental health worker at the university, and also with the Family Systems Family Therapy Center. Brilliant man who had Parkinson's, and when he was younger, he could play. We were in a band called the Dilettantes that rehearsed in my house every Sunday night for years, and we played for every Tammy Baldwin fundraiser, the social workers conference, every liberal goofy ball thing that you could raise some funding for, we'd be out there playing. And Vince could kick a bass line like nobody else, and he could play piano like nobody else. But at the end of his life, when he had some of the athetoid hand movements related to Parkinson's, he could play on the melatophone. And we would go and play. I'd pick up my band. 2 of the guys are dead now. Jack Belly played brilliant clarinet, and Vince. And we'd go play in the nursing home with Vince, and he'd lie in his bed and perform. And just this sense of coming together and the rhythmicity and how it brought him into functionality and brought joy and put us all on equal ground. Another story I'll tell real quickly is how my mother, Leah's grandmother, our precious Grammy, was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at the end of her life. And she, because of some medicines that ruptured the tendons, she lost function of her hands. Now, this woman is the brightest star in the world. At age 89, she was like whipping my butt in Scrabble. And 2 weeks before the last election, she said, I think we should host a debate party, you know? And I invite like-minded people because I don't want any dissonance. And I'll tell you what she said about Kamala Harris. She said, well, I really liked her, but she was kind of sassy to Joe Biden. I'm not so sure if she still has my vote. But mom had trouble. She was on a trilogy machine and had severe COPD and lost function of her hands. So she had the Crohn's rest. So we set up an in-home care system for her. And in 2010, when we had Act 10 in Wisconsin, I was working at Shabazz, and we lost the funding for our program. The funding for all alternative programs was pulled. So I had a meltdown and said, hooey. And I went and studied traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And I took a year and a half off and worked on integrating therapeutic body work and TCM into my cello teaching practice and into my yoga practice. And I learned about how you can use the tuning forks on the meridian lines to normalize muscle tone. So with mom, can I come around and share this with you? And this is how I had intended to begin. So what you experience with these tuning forks when I put them on your body is what you experience at a more subtle level when I play the gong or the cello. And so mom couldn't move her hands to use her own fork or to hold her cell phone or to wipe her nose or to feed herself, right? But we place these on the acupressure points for 2 to 5 minutes, and her muscle tone would normalize and her hands would go from being like this to opening up so she could use her cell phone to call Leah. And she could wipe her own nose and she could feed herself. And then we'd put her hands back in the little braces that you do, and she'd fall asleep, right? Because she was struggling. And when she woke up, the CNA who worked for her would again use them on the different meridian lines associated with the hands, and her hands would open up again. And she could use them for a couple of hours. So what I'm doing with you as I come around is showing you what vibration literally feels like, right? And if you play a cello, how many of you play a string instrument? Anybody here? Your wife did? I'm sorry. It's hard. And but we know when we play a string instrument, we know how it vibrates in our body. And so I was diagnosed with the same disease, but I've been playing. And some days I play 5 to 7 hours and I do sound work, and my symptoms are almost non-existent. So I'm answering your question with lots of anecdotal stories. Do you feel like I'm answering it? Okay, so help me then. Help me then. Well, so how does it impact folks with mental health positive stories? Mental illness. So I worked with people in an adult day center who had schizophrenia and different affective disorders. And there we used music and discussion groups as a impetus for helping them facilitate conversations around their feelings and their goals, their treatment goals. And they would often pick out songs. This one man picked out the same song every day for like a year and a half. And he would put it on and we'd listen to it and we'd process what his feelings were that day. And it gave, oftentimes music gives people the opportunity to say things that they might not really be willing to say or able to say. So you can express repressed emotions. So even like in the Dark Ages or during the time of the plague, the ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, is the children's story for helping us deal with the difficult emotions associated with the plague. So I would say that In a mental health setting, it often is a facilitator for expression of emotions. It normalizes emotions. It gives people a common ground to talk about their feelings and experiences, and it reduces anxiety. I mean, there's evidence-based research that it reduces anxiety, which is a big part of mental health disorders. Mental illness, differentiate mental illness from mental health disorders. What do you mean?
Brain. It's the brain. And we
you
all
wanna
need
feel-
good mental health, but that's different from having a mental illness.
Right, right. So mental illnesses would be like schizoaffective disorder
Right,
and
right.
and schizophrenia.
Mhm.
Yeah. Would you like to feel this?
Well, I don't know if you would ever, do you do it on people who have schizophrenia? I do not, but my son does. And I know that that kind of activity on someone with schizophrenia could be a negative, perhaps.
It could trigger, and that's why I don't do sound baths in large groups or do like individuals therapy treatments or even try to do like a therapeutic program when I'm working in this type of setting. Um, because because folks who struggle with mental illness have triggers, right? And they have different ways. There's a neurodivergent and different ways of processing sensory stimuli that can function as triggers. So you don't want to approach someone who is in an active psychotic state or who is struggling with severe mental illness, because it can destabilize folks. Like when I was at the American Sufi Foundation, and we do a lot of spinning and twirling, which can be really uplifting and joyful, right? But I've seen people with bipolar disorder become psychotic when they're overstimulated. So I mean, it's one of those things where that's why there's a difference between music therapy, sound healing, and sound medicine, right? So a music therapist works with folks with mental illness in a hospital or treatment center where you're using music to address specifically prescribed therapeutic goals to bring about a specific therapeutic outcome. And that's someone who's highly trained in mental health, or if there's someone who works with people with gait disorders, like Michael Tott did a lot with folks with Parkinson's. So people specialize in geriatrics or in mental health or in developmental music therapy, working with children with cognitive disabilities. Sound, do you want to feel it? Sound therapy or sound healing is kind of an airy-fairy new age term, which sometimes I get a little uptight about, because there are a lot of folks like David Gibson going around making claims that are false, and they can be charlatans, right? And they can fool people, or they can say things that just aren't evidence-based, and sometimes use music or sound, more specifically sound. I think sound is more dangerous than music, in ways that can be very unsettling. So knowing your source, and the handouts that I gave you are full of the most credible, respected sound practitioners and music therapists and sound researchers in the world. So I try to base my work on what I know intuitively through spirit and through my own practice, and my work on what I've learned from some of the best teachers, I think, in the world. Did that answer your question? Yeah. So I think I've worked with many, many people with schizophrenia, and what I've found most of the time is that when they come to music therapy groups, they feel a sense of their truth being honored. When we listen to the music or the songs that they like, they feel a sense of camaraderie. Would you like to feel it? When they join in active music making. And again, as a music therapist, we choose songs that aren't going to be anxiety provoking. I worked at the tri-unit with this little kid. Actually, he wasn't so little, he was bigger than me, and I was pregnant with Yulia. His first name was Devin. And for 3 months, he had his hair in his face and his bangs over his eyes. And he's like, I only listen to heavy metal. So, okay, yeah, well, we can do some AC/DC. And when it was his turn to pick, we listened to AC/DC and, which song do you like? Why do you like it? Well, the very last day
Are you Swifting?
am I a Swiftie? There's our Swiftie. How can you not like Taylor Swift? I get text messages from her every day, don't you? Does anybody else get a text message from Taylor Swift every day? Ask me to donate. Oh, every single day. Did I get you guys yet? Every single day in my text messages, Taylor Swift sends me an email or two. Or a text message. Have you donated yet? Send $5 to Pennsylvania. So Taylor and I are on intimate terms. Oops, I didn't mean to put that in your mouth. Did you feel it vibrate on your tooth though? Yeah. So Devin, the last day of my work at Tri, when it was like we were doing this performance, and I was doing a residency there, and he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. He said, I'd like to dedicate this song to my music therapist, Beth. And he goes, Jim, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. And he was so sweet, and I loved it so much. And I saw a softening of him, and it gave him a way to transcend some of the barriers and the protective defensive walls that people build up around them because they don't feel safe. So I think we can use music to feel safe. Speaking of that, when I play the gong, I will not get too loud. I've been guaranteed by Don Contro, the gong master who brought gong work to this country, that it doesn't cause hearing loss. But I do have earplugs if anyone has hearing aids or is sensitive. I'll only play for a few minutes at the end because we're running out of time. Does anybody else have any other questions? Yeah.
Respond to different music so differently. I mean, I was in a program where they had a whirling dervish moving around, and I was very moved by it, the music and what was going on. And people I was sitting next to said, "Well, that was a complete bore." And I mean, it's like everybody's different and responds to different music. How do you deal with that difference?
Well, that's so important. That's a really, really good question. Yeah. And it relates to your question too. Like, how do you work with someone with a mental illness? How do you plan music that pleases everybody? It's like trying to cook Thanksgiving dinner, right? I mean, you've got someone who's a vegan and someone who's, allergic to 20 million things, and one person who only wants their Brussels sprouts with bacon. So, am I projecting a little? So I think that music likes are, first of all, most therapeutic when you pick music that people relate to from their formative years, their adolescence and youth. So we carry with us an association with music from our adolescence. And that's always a safe place to go back to when I'm working with people in geriatrics. So for example, when I started in music therapy, it would be 5'2", eyes of blue, and oh, could she really, could she coo? Or, I love you truly, or let me call you sweetheart, because people 40 years ago, that's what they listened to. Now, if I were to go into a geriatric facility and I don't mean to use that word diminutively, to a place with a senior, place with seniors, where seniors live, which I'm rapidly am. I would choose music from the 70s, right? And with veterans from the Vietnam War era, the music from the 70s is what they really strongly relate to, or country music. I work with trauma-informed yoga with veterans, and a lot of them love Johnny Cash, right? So picking music that relates to the youth, the experience of in their youth of your clients. And then what do you like? So for example, with the veterans, we don't use, I don't use Soham, which I planned to begin with today, but I didn't because this group is just so different from what I expected. I won't use chant or Tibetan work or Indian mantras because of the association with Afghanistan and Iran and how that can be a trigger to people who've had trauma related to being in war, right? With little kids, you know, when I'm doing developmental music therapy, I always start with a steady beat. Look who came for music today. Look who came. And you bring people together through the beat. And like right now, I literally see some of you beating, see your foot's going. So that brings us together. The tempo, the rhythm creates social cohesion. So with little kids, a lot of call and response. With adolescents, Swifties, with my cello students, right now since the pandemic, I would say 50% of the children that I work with are struggling with high anxiety. And a lot of the girls are really struggling with issues around just fear of what's happening in our culture and our world. So really saying, what song do you need to play today? What will nurture you? Is there a pop song that you're finding helpful? Is there something that will lift your spirit? Is there something you just need to play to express yourself today? With Melissa, I used to say, where do you want to start, Melissa? And oftentimes that's a question in one-to-one sessions or in small group music therapy, like in hospital settings, usually have 6 to 10 people in a music therapy group. And you start with, where are you at today? And that's the ISO principle, right? Or the Gandhi principle, where you associate like attracts like, and you allow them to bring in what they like and they meet it. And then you move forward from there. Being really careful with music from indigenous cultures and not to just respect or socially, you know, appropriate things that are really important parts of shamanic traditions as one of my principles in my work. I use some ideas based in shamanism, and I use instruments that have been given to me. For example, the conch is a traditional instrument used in South America in sound health work. And it's, when I was taught to use it, the man who made this gave it to me and you know, intended for me to use it in sessions. And folks believe that this breaks up tension in the body, places with like cysts, places where there's stagnation. So when you blow it in a sound healing session, you blow it. Now, I won't blow it longer than that because some of you might have hearing aids or be sensitive to sound, and it could be super annoying, right? In this group, I don't want to annoy people. That's not my goal today. But does anybody have any stagnation or a sore spot in their body? No, because what the guy did, no, we're all just great today.
Who doesn't?
I can blow it at myself. um, when I first bought this, the man demonstrated on several people in the group how when he aims it at areas in the body, it helps to break up stagnation and tension in the muscles. And we all know that ultrasound is used to break up kidney stones. And I was working with a woman one-to-one a couple of months ago who had cleidolite cysts under her clitoris, and they were causing so much pain that she was going to have surgery. And we placed the bowls on her. She came into the session, and I said, "Well, I can't really address that. I'm not a physician. You're going to have surgery in 3 days. So my goal in working with you is to help alleviate your anxiety and help boost your immune function through positive imagery." And so I do guided imagery and facilitating a deep state of relaxation and theta and alpha brainwave states, theta delta brainwave states. And I placed the bowl on her lower pelvic region. And the next day, she called me and said, "I'm not in any pain for the first time in 3 months." And she flew out to New York for surgery, and the surgeon said, "They're gone." Now, I was just like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not claiming that what we did worked, but something happened between Thursday and Monday with a persistent problem that had lasted for like over a year and a half. So sound can so you asked like, how do you choose? It's based on the needs, the age, the demographic, the culture, the context. So when I did the Families in Schools Together song, it was written for a bunch of little 8-year-olds up in Sheboygan. We can grow helping each other, cooperating side by side, families in schools together, reaching for the sky. Well, when it got to Market, everybody's like, that's just like such a dud song. So yeah, families and schools together, FAST, and they jammed it up, and then the Brazilians took it, and they just made it like great. They took the idea. So every culture, every situation. That's why music therapy is so different from sound healing, which is practiced more in indigenous cultures or more recently by people who take these certification classes, and they use specific elements of sound. For example, we know I talked about the perfect fifth. That will normalize muscle tone. I'm going to run out of time if I don't start playing soon, but I want to pick a couple more questions. Yes, sir. I hope this is helping you all.
I've done some reading on music and emotions, and I made a list of like songs I like that for anger, sadness, joy. Now, if I'm sad, is it better to play sad music or to play joyful music to pull me out of the sadness?
Well, what they say in music therapy practice is that you meet the client where they're at. And if you're feeling sad, then you need to welcome that sadness as a teacher and a tool and allow yourself to experience it. Is it grief that's really legitimate that you know, need to be with? And but then maybe you don't want to sit with it for the rest of the day. So maybe say, okay, I'm in this space and I want to honor where I'm at, but then maybe transition to something that will take you to the place that you want to be. Do you want to be in your grief because it's comforting? Is that where you need to be? Or do you need to acknowledge it and then move to a more uplifting place? And that's the type of situation where I would do movement to music because the rhythm will help energize you. Some put on headphones or put on the radio and start doing some chores, start doing some sweeping, start doing something that's meaningful rhythmically, you know, in your own home. That's how I would use it. And then maybe, you know, when you're cooking, you want to put on something joyful and put some joy and some positive energy into that food just through intentionality. So John Ballou says that intention plus sound equals healing. And he's on this list. Okay. Is that answer your question? Yes, honey.
So sometimes, and this kind of goes to like what you were saying, like if someone's feeling just overstimulated by tons of noise, like what, and they're just like, I need quiet, or there's someone who doesn't want a lot of noise, and like, how would you approach that if you were in, you know, a session for like a one-on-one or like group session, and someone's like, I just need it to be quiet?
That's a great question. So adagios, which have a tempo of about 1 beat per second, 1,000, like da da. Here, I'll just play. So, and I'm actually going to be using a piece in a few minutes that I think would actually be really good for this. But you want to have something like that tempo. And with folks who are struggling, I might do something like, hear how you want to hear that resolved. Don't you want me to go somewhere? That dissonance. So you take it to a dissonance. Here I'm holding that note. And it would be this chord. And you want to hear the 7th chord. Resolve. Did you hear how I resolved it? So when you're in church and you sing the plagal cadence, the amen cadence at the end of the song, that ends the song and it puts a finish on it. So adagios at 60 beats per second. Music from, again, from a person's childhood or from their early youth is also often calming. Oftentimes music without words. Words function as a discriminative stimuli. So when I do sound baths, I never use words because I want to take people out of the beta state that we're in right now, where we're actively listening and engaging, and into more of a, so I say beta is like, I'm here, I'm on it, I've got my things to do, I'm in my groove, right? Followed by alpha, which is more like I'm daydreaming, I'm in a nice space, versus theta, well, you know, where you're just going into deep, deep relaxation. And of course, delta would be sleep, right? So using music that's at a slow rate that matches your heartbeat or even slower, and music without words, because then that won't bring you into conscious association with things that are causing you stress or in the space, or songs that you just love, Leah. Songs that you just love. So having your own playlist of what comforts me, and that's as unique as every person in this room. Any more questions?
Well, it's not a question, but I can tell you, I lead hymn sing at Attic Angels in the memory care unit, and I can't carry a tune, but when we start singing a hymn, they know it really well and they can sing it loud and proud. Is all I
Loud.
can say.
Cheers to you. And that's one of the most important things you can do. I'm so grateful that you do that, because it gives people a sense of connection to spirit. It gives them a sense of belonging. It builds social cohesion. It allows them to function at their highest level of functionality. It creates meaning, memory, companionship. What you do is so valuable. And that is just a gift that you're sharing with the world. And the fact that you don't sing well is probably helpful. I remember when I was a music therapist at Meriter, the director of therapy said, yeah, Beth, you're great at piano, you're great, you know, but people always sing along with you. And I said, yeah, sing along with me, because I'm not such a great singer. And people join in. But when Brian, the music therapist, who was like this really attractive young man, would come in and he sang from his heart, and he had the most beautiful voice in the world, everyone just sat there listening and enraptured and relaxed, but not engaging. So yeah. And when I was teaching, I'd say, kids, sing with me, cover me up. You know, my instrument's the cello, it's not my voice. Any more questions? Or I think we'll start playing a little bit for y'all. Okay, so I brought all of these different instruments. Geez. So just for a second, indulge me, and just everyone bring your arms up. Breathing in. Bring it to the crown, bring it up to the top, the soul of the, and then open up into lotus. Inhaling sa, ta, na, ma. I am my truth. So hum, my voice is gone, so sing it with me. So hum, so hum, so hum. Finding that vibration. So our breath is the source of life, right? Our interconnectedness, the beginning and the end. Equanimity is found through breath. Our connectedness is found through breath. Soham is considered the sound of the breath, the life force. Da! It's right here in the solar plexus. So in ancient Taoist and Indian traditions, and in some of the indigenous traditions in South America, and in native cultures, we find the breath. So Leah, will you do si, si, chi, chi? It's the one without any color. No, that's a B. Use, yeah. Si, si, chi, chi. And breathing in and finding your breath. And we're going to do a little sound journey if you're comfortable with it. And if you're not, I won't be offended if you walk out. And I promise that I won't make it too loud. So finding your breath and closing your eyes, begin to go to the place inside of you where you feel a sense of vibration? Is it your heart? Can you hear your blood pulsing? Maybe place your hand on your chest and another hand on your belly. And allow yourself to feel the rise and fall of your breath. So today, in this very little mini sound bath, what we're going to be doing is using rhythm to help us down regulate, sound to help us settle, and Leah, we're going to slow it down even more. 1, 1, 2, 2. And if you have a mantra, or if you have a chant, or you have a spirit guide or a friend or an ancestor or a connection to divine that's comfortable for you, you can invite that to come be in this space with you as you explore your relationship to sound as a vibrating being. George Leonard in The Silent Pulse says, at the heart of us, at the soul of each of us is a silent pulse. It is our own, and yet it connects us to everything in the universe, just like our breath. And in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was sound. Allow yourself to receive the vibrations today that I offer through music and pitched instruments to resonate within you, nurturing you, softening you, bringing you to a place of self-compassion. We all know that compassion for others begins with compassion for ourselves. So finding your own beat, your own rhythm, your own pulse, acknowledging it, being with it, and letting yourself sink into a most relaxed and beautiful place. That any thoughts or feelings that don't serve you, let those just drift away. Allow them to drop from your consciousness and roll off like the waves of the ocean, allowing yourself to sink into a beautiful, safe, soft space. Maybe bringing your hands to your heart center, if that's comfortable. And we'll end today with a meditation, a loving kindness meditation. May I know the causes of comfort. And may my dear ones know the causes of comfort and compassion. May our communities know the causes of comfort and compassion. And may all beings known and unknown know comfort and compassion. May I know joy. And may my dear ones know joy. May our community know joy. And may all beings known and unknown know joy. May I be safe and know peace. May my dear ones be safe and know peace. May our community be safe and know peace. Especially may our leaders be safe and know peace. And may all beings known and unknown be safe and know peace. Through vibration, we come to light. And when we are in light, we are with divine and source. We thank you for this opportunity to be with light and with source. I honor the light in each one of you. Sat Nam. Thank you for this practice. So if you have more questions or you want to experiment with any of the instruments, that's fine. We will be doing full sound bath, which is a hour-and-a-half immersion into all of these sounds combined, which is designed to be restorative and nurturing. That is my goal when I do a sound bath, not to do therapy or to evoke a big, huge change, but to nurture and to bless us with the most natural source of divine love, which is the word.
Well, thank you, Beth, so much. This was fascinating. And next week, we have another Beth coming to speak about PFAS in our drinking water for something totally different.
John Stuart Reed talks about how we can purify our drinking water with vibration. So there's some good evidence to support it, you guys. If you're interested in clean water, look up John Stuart Reed.